Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Certainty Talks. On this show, we talk about certainty, a topic that always feels important, but feels more important today than ever before, but always an important topic. We got my good friend and business partner in the Whale Club here, Mr. Paul Sparks. Now, in the game in your favor. Now, I am on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And if you get value out of the show, please share this. Keep that loop open as long as you can. I promise you, we will at some point close that loop with you. And please write your takeaways in the live chat after you've had a chance to think about it. Put your 6-word update in the comments below on the YouTube channel. So today, Paul and I will be talking about maybe some feelings of resentment, whether in your previous business partnerships or potentially your existing business partnership, and how there's some tools or some application we can help you with that. Now, before we get into that, let's go into 6-word updates. Paul, what'd you got?
My 6-word update is under contract to build 18 townhomes.
That is exciting.
Yeah. Talk about upside plays, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that business relationship that I have with these, partners in that business, and how this idea of the 70-30 rule for business partnerships has worked extremely well for that particular business relationship, and it allows you to do bigger deals and stay playing your game. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
All right, awesome. For me, my 6-word update is no evidence does not mean non-existent. And so, we talk about sales leadership, and like so many people are like, well, can I afford to spend money to invest into my team? And the problem is you never see how much it costs to not invest in your team, right? What does turnover cost? What does lost contracts cost? What does lost opportunity cost? We never look at that because it doesn't show up on the P&L, right? And because it doesn't show up on the P&L, no one really looks at it. So don't look for evidence before you make a decision. Sometimes a lack of evidence could be a false negative.
Well, it speaks so well to our conversation we had on here last week around, not paying attention to the downside of your decisions.
Oh, yeah.
We're always looking at the upside. But what you're saying here is like, there's a tremendous amount of downside associated with this, but it's really hard to quantify.
Right. Exactly. How do you go and measure it? Because it's not immeasurable. You can't go into QuickBooks or your bank account and look at it directly. So
yeah, and humans aren't wired to look at it from that perspective. We're like, we're only looking at the upside, and we spend all of our time trying to quantify that, and that's what Dan's done is he's tried to rewire our brain to start paying attention to, like, if we can just eliminate the downside, all we're left with is upside.
Exactly right. So, feelings of resentment in your previous or existing business partnership. Have you ever felt that, Paul?
Yes. And I don't know what makes us think that even is the best way to go about this, but that's every business relationship that I ever entered into was a 50-50 partnership up until maybe about a year ago.
So let's talk about the feelings or the experiences in getting into a business partnership. What are some negative feelings that you associate with that?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is I think it could be summed up in, like, you're not pulling your weight. There's this expectation when there's 50-50 that those two people, or maybe there's 4 people involved, that everybody's pulling the exact same amount of weight.
Yeah.
But that's almost never the case.
Right. Well, I had my very, very first partnership was me and my 3 best friends. Right. We're all 25% partners. And there's a happy ending here. We're still friends. Right? We dissolved that relationship, we're still friends. Or that partnership, but we're still friends. But there were definitely some pretty intense meetings about, like, hey, you're not carrying your share. What are you doing over there? It seems like we're doing all the work and you're just kind of cashing the checks.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what we see the majority of people do. And it's everybody wants 50%. I think that has a lot to do with, you don't want to get left behind. You don't want to give up, so my mom's an attorney, and I've talked to her, countless times about just different business relationships. And she would always tell me, like, if you're going to do 50-50, at least do 51-49.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least make it so that, like, either you have very clear on, I either want 40, she wants me to always have 51%.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm sort of like, well, now I think about it a little differently. I don't want an even partnership. I don't want it to be very, the expectation that we all pull our own weight, because that's almost never the case. We all have different things in our life that happen. Some of us have a wife and kids. Some of us really like to travel the world. Some of us have businesses that others don't. And it's just hard to account for all those variables.
Well, I mean,
And
we're talking
very
about,
rarely.
I think, was it last week, the week before? We're talking about timer, right? Like we all bring something different to the table, right? Some of us have more
Exactly.
time, some of us have more influence, some have more money, some have more energy, some have more relationships, right? Some like to travel, like you mentioned a moment ago. Some have wife and kids, right? Like if you got a wife and kids, right, and your time is not as relevant as available, right? And this other guy is a young single person, like all the time in the world.
Mhm.
Or someone, I think we were talking about, we're going to get to your townhouse situation, right? Maybe someone brings a lot of money to the table. Maybe someone brings a lot of wisdom and expertise, and that's all they bring.
Mhm.
So, anyway, continue.
Well, I just think that it comes down to there's very few situations where it's even, and let's bring this back to the barbell concept.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the barbell many times on this show, but for those who haven't heard us reference it, it's a framework for removing risk. And I know that doesn't sound super like, trendy or whatever, but like that is the essence of what's in this book, Rigging the Game, and what we were just talking about a second ago. We don't tend to pay attention to the downside. We go into these partnerships with the best of intentions. Everybody's really excited. We're going to split 50-50.
We're inspired and motivated, and man, this is going to be awesome.
Let's go take on the world.
Nothing bad can happen here.
Right. Yeah. So we're paying attention to the upside. Classic, right? Classic stuff, only looking at the upside. But what do we know? I mean, most marriages end in divorce. I know that sounds bleak, right? But like a lot of business partnerships do the same, and I think it has a result. It's a result of not properly, one, paying attention to the downside. Here's the things that could come up, but also not defining and setting those things, those rules. We call that the commissioner frame, defining up front how we're going to deal with certain things, who's responsible for what. Maybe it sounds obvious, but I've made this mistake many times.
Well, this is one of those things that's really obvious after the fact.
Sure.
Right? There's so many things that are so obvious after the fact. So, someone that's listening right now, they're newer in real estate and they don't have the money, right? They don't have the experience, and they meet someone at a meetup, at a RIA. Hey, Paul, it's good to meet you here. I'm working my job. I'm trying to quit. I want to invest in real estate. You're trying to do the same thing. Let's partner up 50-50, and we'll just kind of spread the resources, right? Or spread the responsibilities. So I guess what are the questions or commission, you're talking about commissioner frame, what are some things that they should be asking themselves before they agree to, before they even proceed with that 50-50 conversation?
I would, again, this is all concepts that I learned recently from Dan. So this is all new stuff to me. And I've been reorienting my life around this. And let's just jump right into it. Like, we call this the 70-30 rule. And the idea that Dan approached us with is like, well, it's almost never 50-50. Right. And nor do I want it to be. Think about the barbell. 50-50 bets, in my opinion, are loading the weight in the middle of the bar. Yeah, it could go well, but it could also go really terribly. right? That's what we mean when we say loading the weight in the middle of the bar. So either we want to be on one side or we want to be on the other. And so that one side represents 30%, the other represents 70, right? And there's the barbell showing up again in this particular application.
Well, I guess the question here for the two newer people is like, but because you touched on it in the very beginning, it's like, but Paul, I don't want to give up more than half.
Right. Well, I think that has a lot to do with the biases. And actually, this next week in the Whale Club, as you know, we're getting ready to really dive into understanding our own biases. But I feel like a lot of that has to do with a sense of FOMO, like you're missing out on something, right?
Hmm.
If I take 30%, oh, well, I won't have control. I won't have decision making. I won't be able to make more money or something like this. This person's getting more than me. Why would I want that? And I think that's what we're going to spend the rest of this show talking about. Why it's better to either align yourself with 30% or with 70%. And that starts by setting clear expectations on the front end of what does that mean to take 30% and what does it mean to take 70%?
Right. Okay. So the commissioner frame. So we're gonna decide the rules. I mean, I guess for me, right? Because I know for sure myself, when I first started, I had a lot more scarcity mindset. I don't want to give up more. I don't want to give up more than half, right? But obviously now we know there's a great reason for it. And part of
Mhm.
it is a very, very clear expectation, right? So
Yes.
you want to talk about the I guess the upside or the reasons for the 70/30. What were the things that we've learned that this makes sense?
Yeah. Well, um, I'm just going to briefly touch on. We're going to come back to the commissioner frame, but Dan calls this another frame. He calls the parenting frame,
Hmm.
which is really how do I prevent bad things from happening? So you put yourself in a position of a parent. A lot of us listening to this are parents. Maybe you're not a parent, but I'm sure you could understand that as a parent, you don't want bad things to happen to your kids, right? You're trying to prevent bad things from happening to them. And that's the same way that we want to approach anything that we do in business is first ask ourselves, well, how do we prevent bad things from happening? Um, One of the things that can go wrong in a 50-50 partnership is this whole concept of you're not pulling your weight.
Hmm.
That's a bad thing. That's a virus that will infect that relationship
It's
pretty
pretty
quickly.
hard. I know you can work through it, but that sentiment, once it starts percolating to the surface, it's pretty hard to remove.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we can prevent that is just don't do a 50-50 deal, right? And I should there's a caveat to this. I'm speaking more towards new business relationships. Now, if you've been like Nick and Dan, for example, they have a 50-50 partnership. They've been in business for quite a while, right? They each understand the strengths of the other. They've tested this, they've worked it through, right? And there's a lot less risk for them doing it that way because
Hmm.
they've worked together for such a long time. We're
Right.
speaking more towards new business relationships.
Yeah.
Um, so the first thing that we need to do is try to prevent bad things from happening, right? The way you do that is get stuff out of the middle of the bar. A 50-50 relationship with someone you've never been in business with or maybe have done one business with before is the definition of leaving yourself exposed to risk.
Yeah. Well, especially, right? I mean, you look at most operating agreements, right? Like 50/50, both parties have signing authority. They're both decision makers. There's no tiebreaker.
We got to agree.
It's got everything has to be consensus, right?
Yes.
Especially maybe you got a 50/50 business partnership where one guy's married. Now it's now you gotta get buy-in from multiple people. It
Yes.
inserts all sorts of complications.
Yeah. So you can prevent bad things from happening in
Hmm.
your business relationships by just setting clear expectations up front and aligning more with the barbell by getting things out of the middle. So with that being said, we're going to say that our barbell looks like this. You've got 30% on one side, you've got 70% on the other side. So let's talk about the 70% because that sounds awesome. I do want 70%.
Hmm.
What are some of the reasons why you might want 70% in a business?
I would say, as a person that my younger years, I would have the idea and I would execute the idea. I would run the idea. It's my dream and I'm executing my dream. And all I need from you, Paul, is some words of wisdom, some guidance here and there, potentially some money or additional resources.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like it's very clear that the person that has 70% is running the show. I'm the one making the decisions. I don't really need your decision.
Hmm.
Of course, I value you as a partner. I say
You
you,
value my input,
I'm speaking generally, right?
right?
Like I value the 30% partner. That's why you're here.
Hmm.
But it's the same reason why my mom would tell me you either want 51% or, you don't want 50-50 because there has to be a tiebreaker. We're not always going to agree.
Right.
Right. So who's going to actually decide this? Well, the person that takes 70%. There's also an expectation that if you're taking 70%, you're taking the majority of the risk, right? Reliable upside. With upside typically comes with more risk. So
Hmm.
you're the one doing the work. You're the one that's going to put your time and, the timer model. You've got maybe more reputational risk. You've got more attention risk, probably more money risk potentially. It could be, maybe it's not. But
You're,
I think
you're the one putting out
that's
the
how I think
fires.
of 70. Say again?
You're the one putting out the fires, right?
Right.
Angry clients, shipment didn't make it. It was supposed to be there on Friday. It's not gonna be there until Tuesday. You're the one that's to put out that fire.
Yeah, let's take an example. I mean, the way that we've designed our partnership in the Whale Club, and maybe this is oversharing. I don't know. I don't really care. Nick and Dan are our business partners, you
Hmm.
and I, in that business, right? And we've divided the responsibilities towards you and I are the very active side of the business. It's
Right.
our responsibility to run the calls, to manage the community, to bring the investors in. And because of that, we're taking 70%. Nick and Dan have 30%. They play more of a silent partner. I wouldn't say necessarily silent, but it's their role to support.
Their advisory.
Correct. Now, of course, they have tons of resources. They have tons of things like that, but it's not their responsibility to make day-to-day decisions. It's not their responsibility to put out fires. It's not their responsibility to do any of that stuff.
Hmm.
It's ours.
Right. And it is their responsibility to call us stupid, or
Right.
or if we're acting like a-holes, according to Dala, don't act like an a-hole. It's their
Right.
responsibility to point out we're violating our own principles.
And so there's a lot more upside clearly for us in this business at
Hmm.
70%, but we're going to take on more risk, more responsibility, more just more activity
We're
in the
driving the
business.
car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why we've decided to take 70% is because we're looking for an upside play,
Hmm.
right? Whale Club is our upside play. And that contrasts very differently from their role in the business, where they're not necessarily looking for the upside play. They've already got their upside plays.
Hmm.
They're looking for a more reliable play, one where their risk is a lot lower, their time and their energy is a lot lower, but they still share in a lot of the benefit.
Well, I mean, you look at for them, and again, maybe we're sharing a little too much here, right? We're not their only partnership, right? They've got CCA and they got a bunch of graduates, and they've decided to invest in some of the CCA grads' business ventures. So for them, 30% is the reliable model in that if they got 30% in multiple ventures, there's going to be upside in one or two or more of those, right? So they're placing multiple bets, knowing that one, two, or more are going to blow up,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Yeah. So let's talk about case in point here. Your townhome. How does the 70/30 apply here?
Well, in that case, it was actually a result of a failed 50-50 partnership. Um, so when we got into the first deal I ever did with this guy named Hassan, he's a close friend of mine and business partner. We actually had a 70-30 deal. And I had 70% of the deal. He had 30%. He actually this was the last pop top that we did. If you're familiar with the stuff that we do with what I do, it's the one in Sloan's Lake that we did. And I had 70% of this deal and he had 30. His role was essentially to manage the contractor, basically. I was the one that raised the money. Actually, he found the deal, and his role was to manage this contractor. Well, we got into the deal, and the contractor that we were going to work with completely just like, it was very incompetent. We had to let them go, and that happens. But Hassan had to step in, and it was very clear that he was going to be doing a lot more work than was originally intended. So we basically evened up. And, I was like, yeah, I get that the 70-30 thing was what we decided on at first, but there was a lot of resentment with that,
Mhm.
right? He resented the fact that I was making so much more and not really having to do any of the day-to-day stuff. So we evened it up basically towards more of like a 50-50 partnership. Which still caused resentment throughout the process, right? Where it was like, but Paul, you didn't even find the deal, and you haven't been on site managing any of this stuff. Why the heck should I give you 50%? And so we had to fix that, right? We had to fix that going forward, because it was perfectly clear in that case in point why there was resentment, because I didn't deserve that.
Mhm.
Now, I'm an excellent negotiator, right? So that's why I got it in the first place. But what I realized is, if I want to preserve this long term, if I want to prevent bad things from happening in this relationship, I've got to align better with this 70-30 model. So this new townhouse project that we went and got, I've got 30%. Right? Why? Because all my role was to raise the equity. We raised about $2.5 million for it. I'm signing on the debt with these two other guys, Nate and Hassan. But because they found the deal, because they're going to do the majority of the work, they should get the majority of the upside.
Yeah.
And that completely changed how we approach each other in business. There's no more resentment. It's very clear that Paul is a minority partner in this. But I still get a lot of benefit from this,
Right.
because I don't have to do any of the work. And now I shouldn't say don't do any of the work. It's their responsibility. We've set very clear expectations up front, who's doing what, and we've aligned our partnership with those responsibilities.
Yeah. So if someone's listening here, right, they might ask the question. They're playing, devil's advocate, or investor frame. Is that the question here? Is that the way? Would you call it? Right? No, not the skeptical frame. Right? We're gonna apply the skeptical frame. But Paul, can't we do a 50-50 if we set all the expectations clearly?
Well, this is you're never going to catch me saying that there's a right or wrong way to do anything, right? Because a lot of this is preference based.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're willing to take on that middle of the barbell risk where like maybe it does go really well, I think all I'm trying to say is that my experience and the experience that we've learned from other people who have launched multiple businesses is that 50-50 rarely works.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's evidence in a lot of failed business relationships, a lot of failed friendships and marriages, because it's really tough to align with a 50-50 thing where everybody's got to pull the exact same amount of weight, because that just rarely happens.
Well, I can say, in doing this for almost 16 years now, and whether in my own business partnerships or in me counseling other partnerships, what we've found consistently is that you can both go in with the best of intentions, right? Very clear expectations. But it almost always occurs, even if both sides are pulling their weights. We have this story that we tell ourselves because we see everything we do and we don't see what they do. And there's also, it's just natural human behavior. If I screw up, I can explain it. If you screw up, I can justify my mistakes all day. I'm just human. But if you make a mistake, it's like, what was Paul thinking? Why didn't he think about that? What?
Yeah.
It's I can't believe Paul did that again.
Well, there's a quote that I'm just trying to remember it, but it's like, I forget who says it, but we judge ourselves by our intentions,
Mm-hmm.
and we judge others by our actions. I mean, the best example of that is like, think of yourself in a car, right? You're driving home from work and somebody darts into your lane, and you're like, you flip them the bird and you're like, screw that guy, and you get really upset. But then when you have to, oh, I almost missed my turn, and you've got to jump over real quick. Well, you've got a great excuse, a great reason. Well, I had to do this because I
You can
have to get
explain
where
it.
I'm going.
Yeah, you can explain that.
So
Right.
we judge others
Mhm.
by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Exactly. So
Um,
that's why 50/50s generally, not never, but I would say less than 15% of the time work out. And it's probably 15 is probably kind of high, right? And it's because even if you both operate with the best of intentions, there's still always that, man, I'm always working late. He's never working late. Or, um, I have to take care of these things. He never has to deal with the difficult clients. How come I have to deal with the difficult clients? No matter what, there's always, not always, but there's very often times I'm doing all the hard work and they're taking care and they're just doing like the easy stuff.
mhm. Where have you seen this show up in your life, in your businesses?
Well, like I said, the very first one was with all my friends, right? Like my three best friends. We were flipping properties. Well, actually, here, I'll give you another example, right? This same exact partnership. So we bought a property in Munns Park. That's about an hour and a half, 2 hours north of here. We bought it to flip 2006 ish, around that time, right? And then the market starts slowing down. You've heard this story. And my friends and I are like, well, we should probably just turn this into a rental and just wait the market out, right? And I'm like, no, we bought this property to flip. If we're only going to make 15K and we're splitting 15K 4 ways, I get it's not a lot of money. But if we bought it to flip, let's continue flipping it. Well, I'm 25%. So my vote doesn't, it's not that it doesn't matter, but I'm outvoted, right? So we turn it into a rental. VRBO was very, very new in 2009, vrbo.com. So one of the two guys is consistently dealing with VRBO, emailing potential vacation rental people. The other one was always dealing with the cleaners because there were no systems. There's no Airbnb processes like there are today. In 2009, we had to consistently manage an actual cleaner from 100 miles away. It was not an easy process. And so we'd have our monthly meetings. How are things going? And resentment was consistently the top issue. How come I'm dealing with VRBO? How come he's dealing with the vacation rentals? And Steven, this other guy over here, are just kind of chilling. It's like, well, what do you want me to do? I can't. You guys are doing the two things that have to be done, right? And so there was that consistent resentment. Brewer method, we talked about like I have equity in that company, right? When we started it was a 50-50, right? It became pretty clear, pretty evident, right? Eric's obviously the genius, right? So it became pretty immediate. It's like, should Steve really have 50% of this company? So we had a conversation and we agreed, right? It was an amicable agreement. Like we had a conversation like, hey, here's what I have to do on my end to service this. What do you do on your end? It's like, hey, I'm totally good with this. We want to adjust ownership. I totally get where you're coming from. I don't feel like I'm bringing much more than, or you're the expertise and you're having to deal with fulfillment. I totally get it, right? So we renegotiated. And for that situation, friendship was far, far more important to me than like fighting for like the 50% ownership.
Mm. Yeah, it's good, man. And it's okay to change your mind, right?
Yeah.
I get it. I'm sure that there's a lot of people listening to this. If you're like Steve and I mean, we've done this many, many, many times.
Yeah.
And, I think it's okay to go back to your partner and say, I'd like to give you more equity in this business because it's clear that this is not aligned. Or
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think I'd like to take more in this business because I think that we're just not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think those are two excellent examples. And let's think about the barbell too. How many of us are trying to pack one side of the barbell or the other while ignoring the other side? Like it's okay to take less in a business because you're setting the expectations that like this is your job to run the ship, to make the decisions, and you're clearly pulling more weight. So I would rather align myself with the 30% side of the business. Once I understood that, and I said, well, what are my upside plays?
Yep.
and what are my reliable plays. For example, in my townhouse project, in this relationship I have with these two guys, it's an upside play for me. But what I needed is to take risk off the table in my upside play. It's pretty risky to take down 18 townhomes.
Well, if Paul's gonna go and flip to 18 townhomes, given his history of flipping properties, pretty risky play.
Exactly. Right. So I needed to align better with my actual role in that
Mm-hmm.
business. It's the same thing with a business that we just spun off called Bunny Hill Builds.
Mm-hmm.
And my project manager, because we're not doing as many flips and as much volume in terms of projects and things like this, we said, well, how can we still bring in revenue? I wanted to make sure that he's supported and that he's got a business. Well, there's a perfect opportunity to align with the barbell again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we started Bunny Hill Builds. Now, of course, I was the one that started this entire business. I was the one that brought these resources in. But I've got a lot of stuff on the 70% side.
Yeah.
I need some reliable things, some things that are very low downside for me. So what did I do when we started this business? He's got 70%. Now that may not, a lot of people may not necessarily agree with doing it that way. It's a preference thing.
Yeah.
Well, I would rather be clear. This is your job to run this business. I'm here for support. I'm here to push leads to you. I'm here to support you in, I've got some experience in building businesses now, but it's clear that I am a passive part of this business and his job is to run the active side.
Yeah. And for me, like you're looking at this, right? The 70-30 rule. Like I actually love this rule. I already had a semblance, right, of this idea. So like there's a great show. I don't know if it's still active because I don't watch TV anymore. But I used to watch The Prophet all the time, right? Marcus Lemonis, he'd come in and he'd fix businesses up. So in running our real estate businesses, right, you and me and all these other things we've done, it ultimately comes down to a handful of key things: marketing, sales, money, people. It generally comes down to these four things, right? And so one thing I'm excited about, not 2023, because 2023 is the year we focus, but maybe 2024 or 2025, is that I would like to start acquiring businesses, right? Someone that's got, just like in The Prophet, someone's got a good idea, they got a good business, but they know how to do that part of the business, but maybe they don't like looking at the P&L. Maybe they don't know how to lead people. Maybe they don't know how to recruit. Maybe they've got such a great product, but no one knows about it, right? Whatever it is, I would love to be at some point, like I'll just bring in my group of people that are highly functional, highly trained, very competent, and they can go execute those other things so that other person can take the 70% and just do the part that they love the most.
That's so good, man. Let's talk about maybe how this all plays in with the solvable problem.
Yeah.
We're doing a bunch of stuff, right, in business. We start doing things. We got this business, we got that business, we got this strategy, we got, all these things. And ideally, we're using this stuff to build a life around what actually matters to us. And, I've been talking a lot lately about how real estate is the tool. Oftentimes we get very attached to this tool. And it's kind of like calling your baby ugly in a sense, being able to say like, you don't want to admit that your decisions, weren't the best decisions. Like looking back on it, you're like, actually, I have an ugly baby here.
Well, are you saying that kind of like because our business might at times look like Frankenstein because it's been band-aided all the way up to now?
Well, could be. I think what I'm trying to say is we get so attached to like, either I had this excellent idea and I want at least 50% in the business, but it takes a lot of humility, I think, to either say, one, I'm going to take 70% and I'm going to give you 30, or I'm going to take 30% and I'm going to give you 70. So when I start thinking about my solvable problem, and my solvable problem is that I want to get to $350,000 a year with less than 20 hours of work, very like extremely reliably. I know exactly how much it's going to put in every single week to get that result so that I can play business the same way I play pickup basketball. Now, if I'm going to play pickup basketball, it means I need a lot more 30% and a lot less 70%. So it takes, in my mind, a shift to say, stop trying to take the whole piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to build this ability to sort of play business, what do you know about pickup basketball? I'm going to go play pickup basketball when we get done with this call. I didn't have to show up for practice this morning. I don't have to run a team. I just show up and I pick up with the guys that are there. Now, when I'm on that team, I'm playing hard, like
Mm-hmm.
playing to win. You have my full attention when I'm playing that game. But then when I leave the court, I don't care whether we won or lost at all. Like, it has no bearing on my emotional state, my mental state. It has none
I'm
of that.
glad you got that because I have a hard time when I play poorly.
Right. Well, I'll
It
get
takes a few
upset,
hours. It takes a few
I'll
hours
get
to get
upset
past
when we
those.
lose. Yeah, it might bleed over. Actually, my wife would probably beg to differ. Every now and then I come home and I'm not extremely happy about that guy who, bowed me in the jaw, and I'm trying to get back at him. But the point is like, it doesn't stay very long.
It's not long term, but I mean, just a quick aside here. Like my wife, I remember one night I was going out to play ball, right, pick up ball. She's like, make sure you play well. I was like, oh, that's really nice of you. She's like, because I don't want to hear you whining all night.
She knows your game. She knows your game.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, some people want to win a championship basketball game. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, the fact that I want to play it like a pickup game
Mm-hmm.
is going to differ vastly. I'm not, the guy who wants to go out and build a championship team and go win the league probably doesn't want me on their team.
Yeah. Yeah. If
right?
he's trying to win his intramural league, or if he's still competing in a semi-pro league or playing college or whatever, that guy is not even 70%. It's probably like 99%. But he is all in, right?
Right.
Where we're saying like, look, we want to do it, but you're not getting 100% of us.
Yeah, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I like to play. I like to do this and play. So what I'm looking at across my businesses now is, how do I find more 30% opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they need that shooting guard who can come in and nail the game-winning three, right? And I'm going to play extremely hard in that game,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to help you win that game. But when I walk off the court, like, I got other things that I'm thinking about.
Right.
Maybe I'm going to a different pickup game.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an extremely valuable member to certain games. It's not going to be right for everything.
Right. So I like this. Just on the flip side of this, right? Or saying the 70. So right now with your guys' business, right? Sometimes it might feel this resentment on a 50-50 relationship. It's like, when I'm done with our meeting, we have our weekly meeting, daily huddle, whatever. At night, I'm still thinking about the business. When I wake up, I'm thinking about the business. Maybe on the weekend, I'm thinking about the business. I got to be 70 in that one, because I don't know if you're thinking about the same exact thing, right? So when I wake up, when I go to sleep, I'm thinking about this business. I got to be 70. If you're not waking up thinking about this, then maybe you should be on the 30.
Right. And you just got to know where you sit on the barbell. But there's a lot of risk in playing in the middle, like telling that championship team, yeah, I'll be at every practice, and yeah, I'm gonna like, but that's not the case.
You're Allen
I
Iverson's what
don't
I'm hearing.
want that. What's that?
You're Allen Iverson's what I'm hearing.
Dude, that's right. I had all the Allen Iverson jerseys and shoes and stuff growing up. There's just, and I think there's a lot of people who might get triggered by this. There's not a right, wrong, or wrong way to play business. I'm not saying that there is. You don't have to like the way that I play. Maybe I'm not the right fit for you on your team,
Right.
So yeah, that's, I think, the concept of the 70-30 is, you've got to align. Either I want 70%, because there are some games where I'm trying to win the championship. Like, that's what Whale Club is for me.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of my real estate ventures are. I'm choosing to play this game, and by God, we are going to win.
Or your piece of land.
Right. That's a whole different can of worms. I'm not sure that one's going to be exactly what I want, because I don't know if we can do, like, it's a whole problem with water. I don't know if I can get water out there. If the permits, so all sorts of interesting deals there. But yeah, like, I love playing and chasing those types of deals down. I like looking at them.
Hmm.
And if I'm going to do that and spend my time on it, if I'm going to spend a lot of time and energy on it, I want at least 70% of that business.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, guys, again, these are the kind of things we talk about all the time in the Whale Club, right? So, we're meeting every Wednesday. We're all getting more certainty within our real estate business. So, if there's something you guys are interested in finding out more about, go to realestatecertainty.com. Check out the wait list inside the YouTube descriptions. So to see, if you want to be part of our community, we got amazing, amazing engagement. I actually texted Paul a couple nights ago. It's like, hey, that was an awesome, awesome meeting. There was a lot of engagement there. We didn't really get to discuss some things that we want to discuss because our community is so engaged, and that's such an awesome, awesome situation to be in.
It's hard to fight these battles alone, you know. I think that there's a lot of power in, community. You and I sit here and we talk about a lot of stuff on these episodes, and
Hmm.
we really appreciate the people who continue to listen to all these things that we're saying. What we found was that, like, hearing these concepts, you might have an intention, but do your actions actually reflect this, right? That's the gap that we're sort of talking about earlier. We judge others by, their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. And so there's this big gap between, well, yeah, I get all this stuff, barbells and 70/30 and solvable problem. That's all really cool, and I understand it. The question is, but do your actions align with that?
Hmm.
Are your businesses set up this way? Are you getting closer, or are you chasing more? What we've found is it really takes a community of people who not only understand the language that we're using, but that can support us through this process and can point out and be like, I know you said this is what you wanted, but this is what I'm seeing your actions are,
Hmm.
right? And there's a gap there. What are we going to do about closing that gap?
Yeah, I love that within the community, we're sharing our journey, but also calling out some instances where maybe there's some misalignment between actions and intention.
Yeah,
Another thing too, just going back to the 70/30, here's where I think is probably the most potentially uh, most frequent situations where I see partnerships not work out. So I'm a newer person. I'm a go getter. I'm a hustler. I'm a fighter. I'm gonna go out there and do business. Paul is my rich friend. Hey, Paul, I'm getting real estate. You got money. I got drive. Let's do a 50-50 partnership. Paul's like, cool. You do all the work. I'm good being the money. We'll do 50-50. That works great. First 5 deals, first 10 deals, maybe the first year. What happens after business becomes successful? Money, the money partner, is no longer as important. What always happens then? Well, Paul, I know you brought the money, but we don't need your money anymore.
Mm.
What are we going to do here? And so what I see a lot of times, it either turns into 70/30, 80/20, or the business dissolves. But, if you start the relationship, hey, Paul, I know you got a lot of money. All I need is, time to time, I'm going to say, hey, I need your money. We're going to do some deals together, right? If you're cool with being the money, I'll do everything else. You don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to be in the meetings, right? This is how we're going to run the business. We don't have to have this conversation again later on. And
Yeah.
actually, in a lot of situations, we do private money or hard money because hard money is freaking cheap in Phoenix. I don't understand why it's so cheap, right? But in situations where we say, hey, look, instead of doing hard money or private money, how about you fund the deal? I'll do everything. We'll split proceeds 70/30. That, from what I've seen, is the most common joint venture model or partnership if one person's the money and the other person's everything else on the flip.
I mean, think about typical syndications. That's how they're aligned,
Yeah.
right? The LPs get 70% typically in the deal,
Hmm.
because they're the ones taking all the risk. You see, when you back out and you start like looking at successful business ventures, you start seeing this all over the place.
It's pretty
Um,
consistent. It's funny. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Syndications, it's very commonly 70/30. That's just the way it is.
mhm. Yeah, so we can sort of finish, I think, by case, right? We talk about CASE all the time: collect, analyze, strategize, execute. So the question you should probably be asking yourselves if you're listening to this is, what do I need to collect? Do I have any resentment in my current business partnerships? Right? Let's do a little bit of a collection of that. Well, what business partnerships do I have? What is the feeling? Have we defined clearly roles and responsibilities? And how often are you checking back in with that? Right? Where again, I don't want to sort of make this blanket statement that you should never do 50-50 partnerships. I don't believe in blanket statements. I don't believe in absolutes like that. However, we have seen over time that with new business relationships, oftentimes the first question we need to ask is, how do I prevent bad things from happening? So ask yourself, if you have that resentment at all, or even if you don't have it, how do I prevent it from happening? And consider aligning with this 70-30 rule. Again, it's not something to be taken every single time, but it's worked well for me and it's worked well for Steve in the past. It's worked well for syndications. It works well in most cases, right? So ask yourself, do you have any resentment in these partnerships? And then consider aligning with, well, how do we define the rules so that it fits on my barbell and my solvable problem? Because there's some things that I want 70% in, and I'm going to play those games hard. That's my championship team, right? And we're going for the championship. You shouldn't really be doing a business venture if you're not trying to win.
Yeah.
I don't think, right? And then maybe there's plenty of stuff in your life where you want to play business as a sport. And maybe you don't want to run this championship team. You just want to be a contributor. You want to come off come in, take that shot, win, again, pack those full, but make sure that you're setting those clear expectations with your partnership that, like, hey, I'm going to take 30% of this business. Here are the things that I can provide to you, but your job is to run the show. Your job is to make the decisions. I'm here as a support role in a minority partnership position.
Yeah. No, I think those are all great points. And just again, for my own situation, like with my three best friends, our solution when there was resentment was, let's just sell off all the properties, shut everything down, and we'll part ways and we'll be happy.
Mhm.
Right. Fortunately, it was not an existing business because it was just rental properties. But what was it? I reserved the right to change my mind. Right. If it's not going the way you want it to go, there's nothing wrong with opting out.
Right.
Nothing wrong with opting out.
Yep.
So, all right. So again, hopefully you guys got value here. Please, share your 6-word update. Digest this. It's easy to just listen. The hard thing is to sit back and reflect. So reflect. Go to the comments. Put in a 6-word update. I'd love to hear from you guys what your experience is in this scenario. And we'll see you
Yeah,
guys.
Steve,
What?
just 1 second. So
Yeah.
the 6-word update, I think I want to make sure I'm clear on what that is.
Sure.
Oftentimes, for example, we listen to a podcast, or we listen to a presentation, or we listen to somebody telling us some level of information. I can promise you that if you listen to it this far in about a week, you're going to forget 90% of what you heard here. So the 6-word update is a way for you to, like, collect your thoughts on what you heard in 6 words or less, right? So we ask you guys, please leave us your 6-word updates. It's the takeaway that you got from this podcast. It helps you, like, articulate yourself in a very concise manner, because that's what you're going to take out of this. You're not going to take the monologues that we've given, in this podcast here. You're going to take away your 6-word update, and it forces you to articulate what you've learned. So again, that's why we encourage you guys to do this 6-word update, because it's challenging, and it's what's going to take, it's the small percentage of what you heard that you're going to actually take with you.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to remember the information here is to sit down, think about it, get it concise, that 6-word update, and you can always, not just remember it, but you can always look back to it at a later date. All right, perfect. So wrap up here, and then we'll see you guys next week on the next episode of Certainty Talks. Bye, everyone.